The metal chair felt cold against Zekathara's scaled back. His claws scratched nervously at the smooth table surface as 5 high-ranking officers stared at him from across the room. The interrogation chamber aboard the flagship Dominion's Edge was built to make prisoners feel small and helpless. Today, it was making Commander Zekathara feel exactly that way. His uniform hung loose on his frame. 3 weeks of poor sleep and little food had left him thinner than when he first landed on the human world. Fresh scars covered his arms and neck. The deepest one ran from his left shoulder down to his chest, a gift from a human female who fought with a broken piece of metal like it was a sacred weapon. Admiral Koroth leaned forward, his yellow eyes burning with barely controlled anger. Explain to us, Commander, how 3 full battle fleets were destroyed by a single human colony world. Explain how 50,000 of our finest warriors were defeated by farmers and factory workers. Zekathara's throat felt dry. He had practiced this moment in his mind countless times during the long journey back to the home fleet. Yet now, faced with the tribunal, words seemed impossible to find. How could he make them understand what the humans were really like? The intelligence reports were wrong, sir, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. Everything we knew about humans was wrong. General Vextar slammed his fist on the table. Wrong? Our data came from 17 different species who had fought humans before. Small, weak creatures with soft skin and primitive weapons. How could that be wrong? Because those other species never pushed the humans far enough, Zekathara replied, finding his voice. They fought human military forces in space battles or border skirmishes. We invaded their homes. We threatened their families. We showed them what extinction looked like. The officers exchanged glances. Admiral Koroth gestured for him to continue. Zekathara closed his eyes and let his mind drift back to the beginning. The orbital bombardment went exactly as planned. We targeted their major cities first, then their military installations. Standard invasion protocol. Most species surrender at this point, or at least their governments try to negotiate. He opened his eyes and looked directly at Admiral Koroth. The humans did neither. Instead, they spread out across their planet like water finding cracks in stone. Their government broadcast didn't call for surrender or peace talks. They called for something they named total resistance. What does that mean? Asked Colonel Drakth, the youngest member of the tribunal. It means every human on that planet became a soldier, Zekathara said. Not just the military. Everyone. Children, elderly people, shopkeepers, teachers, farmers, everyone. He paused, remembering the first transmission they had intercepted from the planet's surface. There was a human named Jake Morrison. Our computers identified him as a food producer, what they call a farmer. We watched his property burn from orbit during the bombardment. Do you know what he did while his home was destroyed? The officers waited silently. He made a video message for his family, but he wasn't crying or begging for mercy. He was teaching his wife and children how to make explosive devices using farm chemicals. He spoke to them like he was explaining how to plant crops, calm and patient. His barn was on fire behind him, and he was teaching warfare to his offspring. General Vextar scoffed. Crude explosives made by farmers cannot defeat modern military technology. Zekathara's scarred face twisted into something that might have been a smile. That's what we thought too, sir. That's what killed most of our warriors. He leaned forward, his voice growing stronger as the memories became clearer. We landed, at dawn on the 6th day. The primary target was a settlement they called New Haven. Population, 43,000 humans. Our force numbered 12,000 warriors with full battle armor and heavy weapons support. Those numbers should have guaranteed victory, Admiral Koroth observed. Yes, sir. By every military calculation we had ever used, the battle should have lasted less than 6 hours. We expected to find human military forces waiting behind defensive barriers, ready to fight a conventional battle. Zekathara stood and began pacing, his claws clicking against the metal floor. Instead, we found empty buildings. Not abandoned, empty. The humans had vanished like morning mist, but they left presents for us. Presents? Traps. Simple, clever. Traps that our scanners couldn't detect because they were made from everyday objects. A door that looked normal but was connected to a device that fired metal fragments when opened. Stairs that collapsed when someone heavy stepped on them, windows that exploded outward when approached. He stopped pacing and faced the tribunal. Do you understand what this means? It means every human in that settlement had spent time learning how to kill us. Not just the soldiers or the police. The people who sold food, who taught children, who fixed broken machines. All of them had prepared to murder us with their bare hands if necessary. Colonel Dracht looked puzzled. But surely they couldn't have known our anatomy well enough to place these traps effectively. Zekthara's laugh was harsh and bitter. Oh, but they did know, Colonel. They knew exactly where our weak spots were. They knew how much pressure it took to crack our armor. They knew which angle of attack would cause the most damage. How is that possible? Because they had studied every piece of data about our species that existed in their computer networks. While we were planning our invasion, they were learning how to kill us. Every medical scan, every biological report, every anatomical detail that their scientists had ever recorded about Vorthak physiology, they turned it into a weapon. The room fell silent except for the soft humming of the ship's engines. Admiral Koroth's expression had changed from anger to something approaching. Concern, Zekthara continued, his voice growing more intense. But the traps were just the beginning. The real horror started when we realized the humans weren't running away from us. They were hunting us. Hunting? Yes, sir. Small groups of humans would appear without warning, kill several of our warriors, and disappear before we could respond. They moved through their settlement like they had been born in those streets and buildings. Every shadow was a potential hiding place. Every corner could conceal an attack. He returned to his chair, suddenly feeling exhausted. There was one human female, identified as Lisa Chen. Our intelligence said she worked in a factory that made food containers, simple manual labor, nothing related to warfare. What did she do? She destroyed 2 of our heavy assault vehicles using mining charges and a cargo transport. When we finally cornered her in a dead-end alleyway, do you know what she did? The officers waited. She smiled at us. Then she activated an explosive device that brought down an entire city block. She killed herself and 15 of our warriors just to deny us a single prisoner. Zekthara's voice dropped to almost a whisper. That's when I began to understand what we were really fighting. These weren't soldiers defending territory or resources. These were parents protecting their young. And there is no force in the universe more dangerous than that. Admiral Koroth leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Continue your report, Commander. Tell us about the ground campaign. The ground campaign, sir, was when we learned that humans don't fight wars the way civilized species do. They don't follow rules or honor codes. They fight like wild animals backed into a corner, using every dirty trick and underhanded tactic they can imagine. Zekthara looked at each of the tribunal members in turn. And they're very, very good at it. The interrogation chamber fell silent again as the officers absorbed this information. Outside the reinforced windows, stars wheeled slowly past as the great ship continued its journey away from human space. Away from the nightmare that had begun with such confidence and ended with such terror. The debriefing was just beginning. And already the tribunal members were beginning to understand that their invasion of human space had awakened something that should have been left sleeping. Admiral Koroth shifted in his seat, his eyes never leaving Zekthara's scarred face. Tell us about the first major battle, Commander. Our records show your battalion was tasked with securing the industrial sector. Zekthara's claws dug into his palms as the memories flooded back. Yes, sir, the industrial district. We thought it would be simple. Large buildings, wide streets, perfect for our heavy vehicles. Intelligence showed it was mostly empty after the orbital bombardment. He stood again, unable to remain still as the images replayed in his mind. My battalion moved in at dawn on the 7th day. 800 warriors, 20 armored vehicles, full air support. We advanced in standard formation through what appeared to be abandoned factories and warehouses. Appeared to be? General, Fextar asked. Everything looked normal at first. Broken windows from the bombardment, scattered debris, empty parking areas. Our scanners showed no life signs, no energy signatures, no movement. The humans had simply vanished. Zekthara began, pacing again, his breathing becoming more rapid. We should have known it was too easy. No species just disappears when invaded. But we were confident, maybe even arrogant. We thought the humans had finally shown sense and fled. When did you realize your mistake? 3 kilometers into the district, Lieutenant Krath's squad was checking a building that made metal parts. Standard procedure: send in a small team to clear each structure before the main force advances. They entered through the front door and just stopped reporting. The commander's voice became strained. We waited 5 minutes, then sent in another squad. Same result. No weapons fire, no screams, no explosions. They just went silent. Colonel Drax leaned forward. What had happened to them? We found their bodies later. The humans had turned the entire building into a killing maze. Floors that collapsed under our weight. Walls that fired metal spikes when touched. Corridors that filled with poisonous gas when entered. But the worst part wasn't how they died. What was the worst part? The humans had studied our psychology, too. They knew we would send rescue teams. Every trap was designed to trigger when our warriors tried to help their fallen comrades. The humans used our own loyalty against us. Zekathara stopped pacing and gripped the back of his chair. That's when the real attack began. The humans didn't come at us from the front like honorable warriors. They came from everywhere at once. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. They came from underground tunnels that hadn't existed on our maps. They came from rooftops and windows and hidden spaces inside the walls themselves. They moved through their own buildings like water through cracks, appearing and disappearing faster than we could track. Admiral Koroth frowned. But surely your superior numbers and firepower gave you an advantage in direct combat. There was no direct combat, sir. The humans refused to fight us face to face. They would strike and vanish before we could respond. A squad of our warriors would be advancing down a street, and suddenly half of them would be dead from weapons fired from buildings we had already cleared. Zekathara's scarred hands trembled as he continued. But what terrified us most wasn't their tactics. It was their faces. Their faces. When we fight, we roar and show our strength. We make noise to intimidate our enemies. Most species do the same. Fear and anger make warriors loud and obvious. But the humans... He trailed off, shaking his head. What about the humans? They were silent. Completely silent. When they attacked, their faces showed no emotion at all. They looked like they were doing routine work, like they were fixing a broken machine or preparing food. Calm and focused, and utterly without mercy. General Vextar scoffed. You're telling us you were frightened by quiet enemies? Zekathara's yellow eyes flashed with sudden anger. Have you ever seen a predator hunt, General? Real predators don't waste energy on noise and display. They focus completely on killing their prey. That's what we saw in those human faces. We weren't fighting warriors defending their home. We were fighting predators who had marked us for death. The room fell silent. Outside, the stars continued their slow dance across the darkness. Tell us about this Lisa Chen, Admiral Koroth said finally. Your initial report mentioned her specifically. Lisa Chen. Zekathara repeated the name, like it was a curse. Intelligence identified her as a factory worker, age 32, married, 2 children. No military training, no weapons expertise, no combat experience, just a human female who made containers for food storage. Yet she destroyed 2 of your heavy assault vehicles. Yes, sir. We had established a forward command post in what the humans called Market Square. Wide open area, good visibility, easy to defend. 2 of our heaviest vehicles were providing security while we set up communications equipment. Zekathara's voice became flat and emotionless, as if he was reading from a report. At approximately 1400 hours, a human cargo transport appeared at the far end of the square. Moving slowly, engine smoking, clearly damaged. Our scanners showed 1 life sign inside, a human female. Lisa Chen. We didn't know her. Name then. She was just another human trying to escape the battle zone. Our standing orders were to capture civilians for questioning, so we moved to intercept the vehicle. The commander's emotionless tone cracked slightly. The transport stopped, about 50 meters from our position. The female climbed out and stood beside her vehicle. She was covered in dust and what looked like industrial chemicals. Her clothing was torn and stained. What did she do? She looked directly at us, made eye contact with me through my vehicle's viewing port. Then she smiled. The tribunal members exchanged uneasy glances. It wasn't the smile of someone who was happy or relieved. It was the smile of someone who had just completed a difficult task successfully. She raised one hand and waved at us like she was greeting old friends. Zekthara's claws scratched deep grooves in the chair's metal frame. Then she pressed something in her other hand and her transport exploded. A suicide attack? Not just suicide, sir. The vehicle was loaded with mining explosives stolen from a construction site. But that's not what destroyed our vehicles. The explosion was just the trigger. Admiral Koroth leaned forward. Trigger for what? She had positioned her transport directly over the underground fuel lines that supplied the square's businesses. The explosion ruptured those lines and ignited stored fuel in every building around us. Our heavy vehicles were caught in a ring of fire that burned for 3 hours. The commander's voice became hollow. 17 of my warriors died in that fire, but before the smoke cleared, we found something else. What? Lisa Chen had somehow survived the initial explosion. She was badly injured, probably dying, but still alive. We found her crawling away from the burning wreckage, leaving a trail of blood behind her. General Vextar made a sound of disgust. Wounded prey trying to escape. No, sir, she wasn't trying to escape. She was crawling toward a storm drain that led to the underground tunnels. Even dying, she was still trying to get back to the other humans to report what she had learned about our vehicles and tactics. Zekthara met each officer's gaze in turn. That's when I understood something that still gives me nightmares. Lisa Chen didn't sacrifice herself just to kill our warriors. She sacrificed herself to gather intelligence. Every second she spent studying our formation before she died was valuable information she could pass to other humans. The interrogation chamber fell silent, except for the soft hum of air circulation systems. The humans don't just fight to win battles. Zekthara continued, quietly. They fight to learn. Every engagement, every casualty, every tactical exchange teaches them something new about how to kill us more efficiently next time. Admiral Koroth's expression had changed from skepticism to something approaching concern. Continue your report. Commander, what happened after the Market Square incident? Zekthara returned to his chair, suddenly feeling exhausted again. After Market Square, everything changed. The humans stopped running and hiding. They started hunting us actively. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And we learned that when humans decide to hunt something, that something usually ends up dead. The silence in the interrogation chamber stretched for long minutes before Admiral Koroth spoke again. You mentioned that the humans began hunting your forces. Explain what you mean by that. Zekthara's eyes stared at something beyond the metal walls, seeing memories that still haunted his sleep. On the 8th day, we regrouped at the spaceport. What remained of my battalion, anyway. We had lost nearly half our warriors in just 2 days of fighting. Command ordered us to establish a secure perimeter and wait for reinforcements. A reasonable tactical decision, Colonel Drakth observed. That's what we thought. The spaceport was perfect for defense. Open ground, clear sight lines, nowhere for enemies to hide. We set up sensor nets, automated turrets, patrol schedules. By every military standard, it was an impregnable position. General Vextar leaned back in his chair. But the humans found a way to attack it anyway. No, sir, they didn't attack our position, they attacked us. The tribunal members looked confused. Admiral Koroth gestured for him to continue. The humans changed their tactics completely. Instead of defending their territory, they started hunting our patrols. Small groups of them would appear without warning, kill several of our warriors, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. They weren't trying to drive us away anymore. They were trying to kill as many of us as possible. Zekthara stood and walked to the chamber's single window, looking out at the stars. The first patrol to disappear was a routine reconnaissance mission. 6 warriors in powered armor scanning the residential areas near the spaceport. They reported normal conditions at their last check-in. What happened to them? We found their bodies 12 hours later, arranged in a perfect circle around a small park. But finding them was the trap. The humans had positioned the bodies so we would have to approach from a specific direction. When the recovery team arrived, they triggered devices hidden under the ground. His reflection in the window showed haunted eyes and trembling hands. 3 more warriors dead, just trying to recover our fallen comrades. And carved into a tree nearby was a message in our language: "You are being watched." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The second patrol lasted 18 hours before they stopped reporting. We sent a full squad to investigate, with air support and heavy weapons. They found the patrol's equipment stacked neatly in the center of an intersection, but no bodies. Where were the bodies? We never found them. But we did find more messages. "We know where you sleep. Your armor has weak points. We are learning." All written in perfect Vorthak script, Zekthara turned back to face the tribunal. That's when we realized the humans weren't just killing our patrols. They were studying us. Every engagement was a learning opportunity for them. General Vextar shifted uncomfortably. How could primitive humans learn our language so quickly? They had captured our computer systems during the first day's fighting. While we were focused on military tactics, they were downloading everything. We had in language files technical specifications, tactical manuals. They turned our own information against us. Admiral Koroth's expression grew darker. "Tell us about the human leader of these hunting parties." Ben Rodriguez. Intelligence identified him as a construction worker before the war. Age 28. No military service, worked building human structures. Command thought he would be easy to capture or kill. Zekthara's laugh was bitter and harsh. Rodriguez turned hunting Vorthak warriors into an art form. He led a team of 12 humans, mostly civilians like himself. A teacher, a shopkeeper, a vehicle repair specialist, a food service worker. People who should have been helpless against trained soldiers. But they weren't helpless. No, sir. They were the most dangerous enemies I have ever faced. Rodriguez's team stalked us for 3 days. They moved through the settlement like ghosts, appearing and disappearing at will. They knew every building, every tunnel, every hiding place. Wang, Commander returned to his chair, his movements careful and deliberate. They didn't just kill our patrols randomly. They studied our patterns, learned our procedures, predicted our responses. Then they used that knowledge to set perfect ambushes. Give us a specific example. Day 10. We sent out a patrol to check a water treatment facility. Standard route, 4 warriors, regular radio check-ins every 30 minutes. The patrol reported reaching the facility and beginning their inspection. Zekthara's voice became flat and mechanical. 35 minutes later, we received a transmission on their frequency. But it wasn't our warriors calling in. It was Rodriguez. The tribunal members leaned forward. He spoke to us in perfect Vorthak, using our own radio codes. He told us exactly where our warriors had died, how long it had taken to kill them, and what weapons had been used. Then he described the weaknesses in our armor that his team had discovered during the fight. Colonel Dracht looked puzzled. Why would he give you tactical information? Because he wanted us to know that he already had better information about us than we had about him. It wasn't a military report, sir. It was psychological warfare. He was telling us that we were prey animals being hunted by predators. Admiral Koroth's claws scraped against the table. What else did he say? He invited us to send more patrols, said his team was enjoying the practice. Then he gave us the locations of 3 other patrol routes and told us which ones would be hit next. Did you change the patrol routes? Of course we did. We completely revised our security procedures, changed all our codes, altered our schedules. It didn't matter. Rodriguez's predictions were perfect. The patrols he said would die were found dead exactly where he said they would be. Zekthara's scarred hands clenched into fists. That's when we understood that the humans weren't guessing about our tactics. They were watching us constantly. Every move we made, every decision we reached, every change we implemented, they saw it all. How is that possible? Because they had turned their entire settlement into a surveillance system. Security cameras, communication networks, sensor equipment. Everything was connected and monitored. The humans could track our every movement from dozens of different sources. The commander's voice grew quieter. But the technology wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing that every human in the settlement was part of the hunting network. Children would play in areas where they could observe our positions. Elderly humans would sit on porches and watch our patrols pass. Workers would report our movements while pretending to go about their daily tasks. The entire population was gathering intelligence. Yes, sir. Every human was a spy, a scout, a potential weapon. They had turned their whole society into a military unit designed specifically to kill us. General Vextar made a sound of disgust. Civilians should not be legitimate military targets. Zekthara's laugh was harsh and bitter. Try explaining that to a human child who throws an explosive device at your patrol, sir. Try explaining it to an elderly human who guides your warriors into a death trap while pretending to be helpless and confused. He stood again, unable to remain still. The humans don't recognize the difference between soldiers and civilians when their survival is threatened. Everyone fights, everyone contributes, everyone kills. What happened to Rodriguez's team? We never caught them. After 12 days of hunting, they simply disappeared. No bodies, no equipment left behind, no final messages. They had accomplished their mission and moved on to new targets. Admiral Koroth frowned. What was their mission? To teach us fear, sir. To show us that nowhere was safe, that we could be killed at any time, that our superior technology and training meant nothing against human determination. Zekthara's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And it worked. By day 15, our warriors were afraid to leave the spaceport. They jumped at shadows, fired at empty buildings, refused to go on patrol without massive support. Rodriguez had broken the morale of an entire battalion without ever facing us in direct combat. The interrogation chamber fell silent again. Outside, the reinforced windows' stars wheeled slowly through the darkness as the great ship carried them further from human space, further from the nightmare that had shown them what humans really were when pushed to the edge of extinction. Admiral Koroth's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Your report mentions a final assault on the human power facility. Explain the circumstances that led to this decision. Zekthara's whole body seemed to shrink into itself. The memories of that day were the worst of all, the ones that woke him screaming in the middle of sleep cycles. By day 15, command was desperate. We had lost over half our ground forces and accomplished none of our objectives. The humans controlled everything except the spaceport. So you decided to strike at their infrastructure? Yes, sir. The power plant supplied electricity to the entire settlement. Command believed that destroying it would cripple the humans' ability to coordinate their attacks. Without power for their computers and communication systems, they would be forced to fight us conventionally. Colonel Dracht leaned forward. That seems like sound tactical thinking. It would have been against any other species. Zekthara's voice was hollow. But we still didn't understand what humans become when they have nothing left to lose. Stood and walked to the corner of the room, as far from the tribunal as possible. I led the assault personally. 300 warriors, our best remaining troops with full air support and heavy weapons. Intelligence said the facility was defended by maybe 50 humans at most. What did you find when you arrived? The power plant sat in a valley surrounded by hills. Perfect defensive terrain for the humans, but we had overwhelming firepower. Our scanners showed 63 human life signs inside the main building. Mostly civilians based on their heat signatures. No military equipment, no heavy weapons. Zekthara's claws scraped against the wall as he continued. The facility was run by an elderly human named Frank Miller, age 71, worked there. For 30 years, no combat training. Intelligence said he had a family, grandchildren. A typical human civilian who should have fled or surrendered when faced with our forces. But he didn't flee. No, sir. When we demanded surrender, Miller responded personally over their communication system. He told us the power plant would remain operational and that we were welcome to try taking it if we thought we could. General Vextar snorted. Elderly human against 300 trained warriors. The outcome should have been obvious. That's what we thought too. Zekthara turned back to face the tribunal, his eyes haunted. The battle began at dawn. We expected to have the facility secured within 2 hours. Instead, We fought for 14 hours straight, and by the end, I understood why the humans had never been conquered by any species. Admiral Koroth gestured for him to continue. Miller's defenders weren't soldiers, but they fought like they had been born for war. There was Carol Henderson, a food service worker who had turned the facility's kitchen into a weapons factory. She made explosive devices from cleaning chemicals and threw them at our warriors while laughing like it was a game. Zekthara's voice became strained. There was Danny Price, barely 18 years old, who worked in maintenance. He knew every pipe, every tunnel, every access point in the building. He led our warriors into trap after trap, always staying one step ahead of us, always finding new ways to kill. How were they coordinating without military training? That's what terrified us most. They didn't need formal coordination. Every human seemed to know instinctively what the others were doing. When one group retreated, another would attack from a different direction. When we broke through their defenses in one area, they would seal us off and gas us with toxic fumes from their industrial systems. The commander began pacing again, unable to stand still. They turned the power plant itself into a weapon. Steam pipes became cannons that fired superheated water. Electrical systems became area denial weapons that could kill anything that touched the wrong surface. Ventilation shafts became launching tubes for improvised missiles. But surely your superior numbers and firepower gave you an advantage. Numbers meant nothing when we could only attack through narrow corridors and doorways. They forced us to fight on their terms, in their chosen environment, using weapons they had designed, specifically to kill us. Zekthara's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And they never stopped learning. Every time we adapted to one of their tactics, they developed 3 new ones. Every weapon we used against them, they found a way to turn against us. It was like fighting an enemy that evolved during the battle itself. Tell us about Frank Miller. The commander's hands trembled as he gripped the back of his chair. Miller was everywhere at once. He knew every system in that facility better than we knew our own ship designs. He would appear on communication screens to taunt us, then vanish before we could trace the signal. He turned lights on and off to confuse our movements. He played sounds through the building's speakers to mask the approach of his defenders. Psychological warfare. More than that, sir. He was conducting the entire battle like a symphony. Every human under his command moved according to his plan. Every trap we triggered had been prepared under his direction. Every system that killed our warriors had been modified according to his instructions. Zekthara sat heavily in his chair, suddenly looking much older than his years. But the worst moment came near the end, when we finally cornered him in the main control room. The tribunal members waited in tense silence. Miller was badly wounded. Shrapnel from one of our weapons had torn open his chest. He was bleeding heavily and could barely stand. Any rational being would have surrendered or tried to escape. What did he do instead? He was trying to activate the facility's reactor. Overload sequence. Even dying, he was attempting to destroy the entire power plant and everyone in it. His own people and ours. Colonel Drax looked confused. Why would he kill his own defenders? Because he understood something that we didn't. The power plant wasn't just a facility to him. It was his responsibility, his life's work, and he would rather see it destroyed than let us capture it and use it against other humans. Zekthara's voice cracked with emotion. He looked directly at me while he worked at the controls, blood running down his face, and he smiled. The same smile Lisa Chen had given us before she died. The smile of someone who knew they were about to complete their mission. But the reactor didn't explode. No, sir. One of his own people stopped him. A human medic named Amy Foster tackled Miller and pulled him away from the controls. She saved all our lives, humans and Vorthak alike. Admiral Koroth frowned. Why would she prevent him from destroying us? Because she was a healer, not a killer. Even in the middle of that nightmare, she couldn't bring herself to cause unnecessary death. But Miller fought her, sir. Even wounded and dying, he tried to reach those controls again. The commander's voice became hollow and distant. That's when I realized what we were really fighting. Every human in that facility was willing to die to deny us victory. Not just willing, eager. They fought with the desperation of a species, facing extinction. But you did secure the facility eventually. Yes, sir. After 14 hours of hell, we controlled the building. But by then, we had lost 147 warriors. Nearly half our remaining force killed by a group of civilian engineers and maintenance workers. Zekathara met each officer's gaze in turn. And as we were celebrating our victory, we received word that the humans had cut our communication lines to the fleet. While we were fighting for that power plant, other humans had been attacking our real strategic assets. Your evacuation route. Exactly. The battle for the power plant hadn't been about electricity or infrastructure. It had been about keeping our forces busy while other humans prepared a trap at the spaceport. The interrogation chamber fell silent, except for the soft hum of life. Support systems. The humans had been planning our defeat from the moment we landed, Zekathara continued quietly. Every battle, every casualty, every small victory we thought we had won, it was all part of a larger strategy we couldn't see until it was too late. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. We thought we were conquering them, but they were teaching us exactly how they planned to destroy us. The tribunal chamber had grown cold during the long hours of testimony. Admiral Koroth's yellow eyes reflected the harsh lighting as he leaned forward. Tell us about the evacuation, Commander. How did a routine withdrawal become a disaster? Zekathara's scarred face twisted with pain at the memory. After securing the power plant, Command ordered immediate evacuation. Our losses were too heavy to continue the campaign. The remaining forces were to withdraw to the spaceport and return to the fleet. A sensible decision under the circumstances. Yes, sir. We had less than 400 warriors left from the original invasion force of 12,000. Our heavy equipment was mostly destroyed or damaged. Morale was completely broken. Retreat was our only option. The commander stood and walked to the window again, staring out at the endless stars. But as we prepared to leave, something strange happened. The human attack stopped completely. General Vextar looked surprised. They stopped fighting? All resistance ceased. No more ambushes, no more hunting parties, no more traps. For the first time since we landed, we could move freely through the settlement without being attacked. Our scanners showed human life signs, but they stayed hidden and avoided all contact. Perhaps they realized you were leaving and decided to let you go. Zekathara's laugh was bitter and hollow. That's what we thought too, sir. We believed the humans had finally accepted defeat and were allowing us to withdraw with honor. We were so relieved to escape that nightmare that we didn't question their sudden change in behavior. Admiral Koroth gestured for him to continue. The withdrawal to the spaceport took 6 hours. Not a single shot was fired at us during the entire march. Our remaining vehicles moved in perfect formation. Our warriors maintained discipline despite their exhaustion. For the first time in weeks, everything went exactly according to plan. But something was wrong. Everything was wrong, sir. We just didn't understand it yet. Zekathara turned back to face the tribunal. When we reached the spaceport, our transport ships were waiting exactly where we had left them. Engines ready, cargo bays open, evacuation procedures prepared. It looked like salvation. Colonel Drackth frowned. What changed your assessment, J.K. Morrison? The name fell into the chamber like a stone into still water, creating ripples of unease among the tribunal members. The same human farmer from your initial report? Yes, sir. As our first transport lifted off, we received a transmission on an open frequency. Morrison appeared on our communication screens, sitting in what looked like a simple farmhouse kitchen. He was drinking from a cup and appeared completely relaxed. Zekathara's voice became flat and emotionless. He greeted us politely, like we were old friends saying goodbye after a pleasant visit. Then he thanked us for the educational experience. Educational experience? He told us that the humans had learned a great deal from our invasion. Every weapon we had used, every tactic we had employed, every piece of technology we had brought. They had recorded detailed information about all of it. The commander's hands clenched into fists. Morrison explained that the battle data was already being transmitted to every human military installation across their territory. Our invasion hadn't been a military campaign, sir. It had been a research project. Admiral Koroth's expression grew dark. What do you mean? The humans had been studying us from the moment we entered their system. Every engagement, every casualty, every tactical exchange had been carefully documented and analyzed. They weren't just defending their world, they were learning how to fight our entire species. General Vextar shifted uncomfortably, but they suffered heavy losses. Surely that wasn't intentional. Morrison addressed that point specifically. He said human casualties were regrettable but acceptable given the value of the intelligence they had gathered. Every human who died fighting us had contributed to a database that would help protect millions of other humans in future conflicts. Zekthara's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He told us that the humans now knew exactly how to kill Vorthak warriors efficiently. They understood our weaknesses, our psychology, our tactical preferences. They had learned to predict our behavior and exploit our assumptions. But surely our technological advantages would still count for something. Morrison laughed when he said this next part, sir. He told us that human engineers were already working on countermeasures for every piece of Vorthak technology they had encountered. Our energy weapons, our armor, our vehicles, our ships. They had detailed scans of everything. The commander returned to his chair, moving like an old man despite his relatively young age. Then Morrison showed us something that made my blood freeze. Video recordings of our invasion, but not from our perspective, from theirs. What did these recordings show? Everything, sir. The humans had been filming us constantly from the moment we landed. They had cameras hidden in buildings we thought were empty. They had drones following our patrols from distances our scanners couldn't detect. They had been watching us like scientists studying laboratory animals. Zekthara's voice became strained. The recordings showed our warriors from angles we had never seen. Close-up images of our equipment, detailed shots of our weapons in action, perfect documentation of our tactical formations. They even had recordings of our private communications that we thought were secure. Admiral Koroth leaned back in his chair, his expression troubled. How extensive was this surveillance? Complete, sir. Morrison showed us footage from inside our own command vehicles. Somehow, they had managed to plant listening devices in our most secure locations. They had been recording our tactical discussions, our casualty reports, our morale assessments. Impossible. Our security protocols are absolute. That's what we thought too. But the humans had found ways to bypass every security measure we had. They used our own technology against us, turned our communication systems into surveillance networks. The commander's scarred hands trembled as he continued. Morrison explained that studying us had been their primary objective from the beginning. They had never intended to drive us away or defeat us in conventional battle. They had wanted us to stay long enough for them to learn everything about us. The entire defense was a deception? Yes, sir. Every human who died, every building that was destroyed, every apparent victory we achieved. It was all calculated to keep us engaged long enough for their intelligence gathering to be completed. Colonel Drax looked disturbed. What happened next? Morrison told us that our ships were free to leave. He said the humans had no interest in pursuing a fleeing enemy when they had already accomplished their goals. Then he wished us a safe journey home. Zekthara's voice became hollow. But just before he ended the transmission, he said something that still haunts my dreams. He told us that the next time the Vorthak Empire encountered humanity, the humans would be ready, and they would show no mercy to a species that had threatened their children. The interrogation chamber fell into absolute silence. Outside the reinforced windows, stars wheeled slowly through the darkness as the great ship continued its journey away from human space. There's more, sir. Admiral Koroth looked up sharply. More? The evacuation itself was a trap. As our transports lifted off the humans activated devices they had planted throughout the spaceport, not weapons designed to destroy us, but scanners designed to record detailed information about our ships. They were still gathering intelligence. Yes, sir. Even as we fled, they were learning. Engine specifications, hull configurations, weapon placements, shield frequencies. They documented everything. Zekthara stood one final time, his voice growing stronger as he delivered his conclusion. 3 days after we left their system, we received reports that 3 more Vorthak fleets had gone silent near human territory. No distress calls, no battle reports, no survivors. What do you think happened to them? I think the humans kept their promise, sir. I think they used everything they learned from our invasion to hunt down and destroy those fleets completely. The commander looked directly at Admiral Korath. The humans aren't just another species we can conquer or negotiate with. They're something entirely different. They're apex predators that have learned to think collectively, to plan across generations, to turn every encounter into a learning experience. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout. My recommendation to this tribunal is simple. Mark human space as forbidden territory. Avoid all contact with their species, because the next time we meet them, they won't be learning from us anymore. They'll be teaching us what extinction looks like. The tribunal chamber remained silent for long minutes after Zekthara finished speaking. Finally, Admiral Korath stood and walked to the window, staring out at the stars. Commander, you are dismissed. Report to medical for full psychological evaluation. As Zekthara left the chamber, he heard Admiral Korath speaking quietly to the other officers. Send word to all fleet commanders. Human space is now classified as the exclusion zone. No Vorthak ship is to approach their territory under any circumstances. The warning had been delivered. The question was whether anyone would listen before it was too late.